Welcome back to Cheating Stories Hub. We appreciate every single one of you for tuning in. Before we dive into today's story, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Share your location in the comments below. Now, let's get into this tale of betrayal, strategy, and ultimate triumph. Chapter 1. The celebration unravels. Let's raise a glass to Rebecca, the queen of the house, someone shouted, and the room erupted in cheers. I leaned against the wall in the next room, unseen by the party guests. My back ached after another grueling 12-hour shift, but I smiled to myself, glad that Rebecca's birthday was a success. She deserved this, I thought, after everything I had sacrificed to keep our family afloat. Then I heard it, her laugh. It wasn't the soft, warm sound I fell in love with. This was sharp, almost cruel. You know, Rebecca said, her voice cutting through the chatter and music, if Ryan wasn't so busy trying to be some kind of superhero, he might actually realize how pathetic he is. A hush fell over the crowd, interrupted only by nervous laughter. One voice broke through, saying, "Rebecca, you're terrible." "No, really," she continued, laughing even harder. "The man works 2 jobs for Mia, and he doesn't even see the truth." Her words were like a blow to the chest. I pushed off the wall, my pulse pounding in my ears. I stepped into the doorway, and the sound of glass shattering momentarily stole the room's attention. A waiter had dropped a tray of empty champagne flutes, but I barely noticed. My focus was locked on Rebecca. Her laughter died mid-chuckle as her eyes met mine, her face freezing like she'd been caught red-handed. I stepped forward, my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't realize what." The crowd shifted awkwardly, trying not to stare. Rebecca plastered on a smile. "Oh, Ryan, you startled me." "It's nothing, really, just joking around." "Joking about what?" I pressed, my voice steady, though inside I churned with something fierce. Rebecca waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Everyone jokes about their spouses. It's normal." "Normal, huh?" I scanned the faces in the room, some avoiding my gaze entirely. "If it's nothing, Rebecca, let's hear the joke." Her smile faltered for a moment before she whispered harshly, "Can we not do this right now?" "It's my birthday." "Exactly. It's your birthday," I said, stepping closer, my tone sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Let's celebrate with the truth. Or are you too much of a coward to share it?" Her eyes narrowed, and she hissed, "Fine. You want to do this here? Let's talk." She leaned in closer, her words dripping with venom. "Maybe instead of playing the overworked martyr, you should take a long, hard look in the mirror. You're not the saint you think you are." She turned to leave, but I grabbed her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. "What are you hiding, Rebecca?" "Let go of me," she snapped, pulling free. Turning to the party, she forced a bright smile onto her face. "Everyone, please enjoy yourselves. We'll be back in a moment." Rebecca grabbed my arm, dragging me into the kitchen and slamming the door behind us. The silence between us was deafening, broken only by the muffled music outside. "What is it, Rebecca?" I demanded. "What's the big secret everyone in there seems to know, but me?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You don't want to know." Those 5 words sent a chill down my spine. I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "Try me." She bit her lip, her eyes darting to the door like she was calculating how much time she had before someone came looking for her. Finally, she spoke. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because right now, all I can think is that you've been lying to me." Rebecca took a step back, her face twisting into something I couldn't recognize. Smugness. "Fine," she said, folding her arms. "You really want to know? Let's talk about Mia." Hearing my daughter's name in that tone made my chest tighten. "What about her?" I asked, my voice low but firm. Rebecca leaned in, her smile cold and sharp. "You think she's yours?" The room spun. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "What are you saying?" "Oh, come on," she said with a harsh laugh. "Do the math, Ryan. Or do you need me to spell it out for you?" My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't speak, But Rebecca's silence only seemed to embolden her. "She's not yours, Ryan," she said. "She never was." Her words hung in the air, slicing through me like a knife. My fists clenched at my sides, nails digging into my palms. Rebecca crossed her arms, her expression smug as though she'd won some twisted game. "You're lying," I managed to say, my voice barely audible. "Am I?" She countered, her voice mocking. "You've spent years playing hero, too busy to notice the cracks in your perfect little world." Her cruel laughter echoed in my ears as I stormed out of the kitchen. I didn't trust myself to stay there another second. Chapter 2: A Trail of Lies. I left the kitchen without looking back, forcing my legs to carry me through the crowded living room and out the front door. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, but it did little to clear my head. My car waited at the curb, but I didn't get in right away. I leaned against the hood, my fists still clenched, replaying Rebecca's words over and over again. "Mia's not yours. She never was." The world felt off balance, like the ground had shifted beneath me. Everything I thought I knew, my family, my sacrifices, my love for Rebecca, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I fought to steady my breathing, gripping the edge of the car hood as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. I couldn't let her win. Not like this. If Rebecca thought she could throw those words at me and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. I wasn't going to break. I was going to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. Finally, I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The low hum filled the silence, grounding me. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through years of memories, searching for cracks I hadn't noticed before. The late nights, the private phone calls, the unexplained absences, they all took on a darker meaning now. When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. Rebecca was still at the party, no doubt basking in the laughter and drinks, pretending everything was fine. I didn't turn on the lights. Instead, I headed straight for her office. Rebecca had always been meticulous about her things, but her arrogance was her weakness. She never believed I would go through her stuff. I opened drawers, shuffled through papers, and scanned her files, looking for something, anything that would shed light on what she'd said. An hour passed, and I found nothing. Frustration burned in my chest until my hand brushed against the back of a file labeled taxes. A folded piece of paper slipped out, and I caught it before it hit the ground. It wasn't a tax document. It was Mia's birth certificate. I stared at it, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Everything looked normal at first. Rebecca's name, Mia's name, the birth date. But then my eyes landed on the section for father. It was blank. My hands trembled as I turned the paper over, searching for answers that weren't there. Why would she leave it blank? What was she hiding? My mind raced with possibilities, each more devastating than the last. I folded the certificate carefully and slipped it into my pocket. The faint scent of Rebecca's perfume still lingered in the room, making my stomach churn. I wasn't done yet. I kept searching, my frustration mounting with every empty folder and meaningless receipt. Then I found it, a small, dusty photo album shoved to the back of a drawer. It wasn't labeled, but the pictures inside told me everything I needed to know. Rebecca, smiling, her arm wrapped around another man's shoulders. He wasn't anyone I recognized. Not a coworker. Not a friend. The photos were old, dated just a year before Mia was born. They were candid, intimate, too intimate. My stomach turned as I flipped through the pages, each image feeling like another stab in the back. Who was he? I snapped pictures of the birth certificate and the photos with my phone. Evidence. I wasn't going to confront Rebecca without proof. If she wanted to play games, I'd be the one setting the rules now. Just as I finished, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Rebecca lit up the screen, still at the party. "Don't wait up. Love you. Love me." The sheer audacity of those words sent a surge of rage through me. I clenched my jaw and shoved the phone back into my pocket. I didn't respond. She didn't deserve my words, not yet. I locked the office behind me, leaving everything exactly as it was. I needed more than photos and suspicions. I needed definitive proof, and I knew exactly where to get it. That night, after hours of tossing and turning in bed, I made my decision. I opened my laptop and ordered a DNA test kit. If Mia wasn't biologically mine, I needed to know for certain. Proof I could take to a lawyer, to a judge, to anyone who needed to hear my side of the story. When the confirmation email popped up, a strange calm settled over me. The first step was done. The truth was coming, and Rebecca wouldn't see it until it was too late. Chapter 3: Pieces of the Puzzle. The next few days were a haze of routine and calculation. Rebecca carried on as if nothing had happened, acting as though her words at the party hadn't ripped through the foundation of our family. She was carefree, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Morning, Ryan," she said one day, her voice as chipper as ever. She stood in the kitchen sipping coffee, dressed in her yoga gear, her phone never far from her hand. "Mia's doing great in her classes, by the way. She called last night. You should check in with her." I nodded without meeting her gaze. The sound of her voice grated on my nerves. Every word she spoke felt like a lie. "I will," I muttered, keeping my tone neutral. Rebecca tilted her head, studying me. "You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay?" "Just tired from work," I said, forcing a thin smile. "Nothing to worry about." She shrugged and returned to scrolling through her phone, none the wiser. Every move I made was deliberate now. I couldn't afford to tip her off, not yet. The DNA test kit had arrived, and I was waiting for the perfect opportunity to use it without raising suspicion. That night, after Rebecca went to bed, I made my move. I slipped into the attic, careful not to make a sound. It smelled of dust and disuse, the air heavy with memories I no longer trusted. In the corner sat a box labeled Mia's Firsts. I recognized it instantly. Rebecca had always been sentimental, keeping every little memento of Mia's childhood. I opened the box and sifted through its contents. Baby clothes, hospital bracelets, ultrasound photos. All the markers of a life I thought was mine to cherish. Then, at the bottom, I found a lock of Mia's baby hair, tied with a pale blue ribbon. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the weight of what I was doing pressing down on me. I sealed the hair in the DNA test kit, packed it up, and left the attic as it was. The next morning, I mailed the package, my heart heavy but resolute. There was no turning back now. While I waited for the results, I turned my attention to uncovering more about the man in the photos. I started with Rebecca's email. She wasn't careful about clearing her digital tracks. Years of shared passwords gave me access to her accounts. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. An old folder labeled work stuff caught my eye. At first, the email seemed mundane, schedule updates, meeting notes, but then I found a thread that stood out. Attached to one of the messages was a photo of Rebecca and the man from the album. They were seated in a restaurant, leaning close, her hand resting lightly on his. The email signature gave me a name, Matthew Price. I searched for him online, my chest tightening with every new detail. He had been a senior manager at Rebecca's company before she left, just a few months before Mia was born. His profile photo confirmed it was him. The man from the pictures. The man whose arm had been around Rebecca in those intimate snapshots. The timeline made my stomach churn. Rebecca hadn't just been unfaithful. She had carried on an affair with someone from work, someone she saw every day. And when Mia was born, she walked away from that life, taking her secrets with her. My hands trembled as I saved copies of the emails and photos. I didn't stop there. I dug deeper into Matthew's background, finding his LinkedIn profile, social media accounts, and even his current job. He was married now with 2 kids. A family man in every public sense of the word. The rage simmered beneath my skin. He had built a new life, leaving me to raise a child that might have been his. Did he even know? Did Rebecca tell him about Mia, or had she erased him completely from her life? The following weekend, Rebecca was out again, claiming she was meeting friends for lunch. I knew better. My gut told me she wasn't meeting friends at all. I followed her. She drove to a small cafe on the other side of town, the kind of place we used to visit together before life became a series of endless shifts and sacrifices. She parked and went inside, her movements quick, her head down. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as I watched. And then he appeared. Matthew Price walked through the cafe door, scanning the room before heading straight for Rebecca. She greeted him with a smile that felt like a punch to the gut, warm, familiar, and full of something I hadn't seen in years. I stayed in my car, taking pictures through the cafe window. Rebecca leaned forward, her hand brushing Matthew's arm as they talked. They were close, too close. My chest tightened as I watched, the betrayal playing out in front of me like a cruel reenactment of everything she had hidden. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Lunch is running late. Don't wait up. The audacity of it made my vision blur with anger. She was sitting across from him, laughing, lying to me in real time. I snapped more photos and then drove away. Confronting her in public wouldn't give me the satisfaction I needed. Not yet. This wasn't the time for fireworks. It was the time for strategy. I had everything I needed now. The DNA test, the photos, and the name of the man who thought he could replace me. The storm was coming, and Rebecca didn't even see it on the horizon. Chapter 4. The Truth Comes Home. The cafe confrontation replayed in my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. Every glance, every touch, every laugh, they all drove another nail into the coffin of our marriage. But I couldn't confront Rebecca yet. I needed one more piece of the puzzle, and I had to deliver the blow on my terms. The DNA test results would arrive in a few days. Until then, I played my role, pretending to be the clueless husband. I stayed calm, distant, but not suspiciously so. Rebecca barely noticed my restraint. She was too consumed with her web of lies to see me unraveling them thread by thread. That Thursday evening, I decided it was time to speak with Mia. It wasn't a conversation I wanted to have, but she deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as I could give her without causing unnecessary pain. She was my daughter in every way that mattered, regardless of what the test might say, and I wasn't going to let Rebecca's betrayal destroy the bond we shared. I called her as I sat in the car outside her college dorm. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, Dad." Her voice was cheerful, warm. Hearing her call me, that sent a pang through my chest. "Hey, Mia. Are you busy?" I was hoping we could talk for a bit. "Sure," she said, a hint of curiosity in her tone. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated. "I'll explain when I see you. I'm outside. Can I come up?" A pause. "Yeah, of course. Give me a sec." A few minutes later, she opened the door to her small dorm room. Her smile was warm, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "What's going on, Dad?" I stepped inside and sat on the edge of her bed, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. The room was filled with small touches of her personality, photos of her friends, stacks of books, a guitar propped up in the corner. It reminded me how much I'd sacrificed to give her this life, and how much it was worth, no matter what the DNA test might reveal. "Mia," I began, keeping my voice steady. "There's something I need to tell you. It's about your mom, and about us." Her brow furrowed. "You're scaring me." I took a deep breath. "First, I want you to know that I love you. That's never going to change, no matter what. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever make me see you any differently." "Okay," she said cautiously. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then began explaining. I didn't give her all the venomous details, Rebecca's cruel words, the photos, the betrayal, but I told her enough. Enough for her to understand that there was a chance I wasn't her biological father, that Rebecca had been hiding something for years. Mia's eyes widened as I spoke, tears brimming at the edges. "You're saying I might not be your daughter?" Her voice cracked, and it broke my heart. "You are my daughter," I said firmly, reaching for her hand. "Biology doesn't change that. I've been there for every moment of your life, your first steps, your first bike ride, your first day of school. None of that changes, no matter what the test says." She sniffled, wiping her eyes. "But why now? Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve the truth," I said, "and because I need to know for both of us. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Mia. I'm doing this to protect you. Your mom and I, we're not on the same side anymore." Mia stared at the floor, her face pale, and her hands trembling. "This is so much. I don't know what to think." You don't have to figure it out right now, I said gently. Take your time. Process it however you need to. But remember, you're not alone in this. I'll always be here for you. She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. I just, I don't know how to feel about Mom. I understand, I said. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the conversation settling between us. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. What are you going to do? I met her gaze, my own resolve hardening. I'm going to find the truth, Mia. And when I do, I'm going to make sure your mom faces the consequences of what she's done. Mia nodded, her expression shifting from hurt to determination. Okay, she said. I don't want to lose you, Dad. You won't, I promised. Not now, not ever. That night, when I returned home, Rebecca was already asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a long time, watching her. She looked peaceful, almost serene, as if the weight of her lies didn't burden her at all. It made my stomach turn. I turned and walked away, retreating to the couch. Sleep was impossible. My thoughts raced with everything that had come to light and the promise I had made to Mia. She deserved better than this. We both did. The DNA test results were coming soon. And when they arrived, the last piece of Rebecca's carefully constructed lie would fall into place. She thought she had control, but she didn't realize the storm that was about to descend on her. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about reclaiming everything she had stolen from me, from us. Chapter 5, The Results and the Resolve. The DNA test results arrived 3 days later, earlier than expected. I opened the email in my car during my lunch break at work, my hands trembling as I clicked the link. The page loaded, and my breath hitched as my eyes scanned the words. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. There it was, cold, indisputable proof. Mia wasn't my biological daughter. The truth, no matter how much I had prepared for it, still hit me like a punch to the gut. But instead of breaking me, it solidified my resolve. Rebecca had stolen more than just my trust. She had stolen years of my life, my sacrifices, and my dedication, all under false pretenses. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. That evening, I returned home with the results printed and tucked safely into my jacket pocket. Rebecca was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone and sipping a glass of wine. She didn't look up as I entered. Hey, you're late, she said casually, as if nothing had happened. Yeah, long day, I replied, my voice neutral. I couldn't let her sense the storm brewing inside me. Not yet. I went upstairs, placing the envelope with the DNA test results in my desk drawer, along with the photos and emails I had collected. The evidence was piling up, and soon I would have enough to confront Rebecca in a way she couldn't deny or manipulate. The next few days were a careful balancing act. I watched Rebecca closely, noting her every move. Her routine was predictable, her habits sloppy. She had grown too comfortable, too confident in her ability to deceive. But that was about to change. On Saturday, Rebecca left the house in the late morning, claiming she was meeting a friend for brunch. I had no doubt she was lying, and my gut told me she was seeing Matthew Price again. This time, I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I had enough proof, and my focus had shifted to the final steps of my plan. I called a private investigator to dig deeper into Matthew's life. The initial background check had been surface level, but now I needed more. I wanted every detail about his finances, his career, his relationships, anything I could use to destabilize his life as thoroughly as Rebecca had destabilized mine. The investigator didn't disappoint. Within days, I had a file filled with dirt on Matthew. Tax fraud, whispers of workplace misconduct, and even a pending lawsuit from a former employee. Matthew wasn't just a man who had an affair. He was a liability, a walking scandal waiting to happen. And I intended to use that to my advantage. That evening, I called Mia. I couldn't keep her in the dark any longer. Hey, sweetheart, I said when she answered. Are you free to talk for a bit? Yeah, what's up? She asked, her voice wary but calm. I got the results, I said, my tone measured. Do you want to know? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she finally spoke. "Yes," she whispered. "Tell me." "It confirmed what we thought," I said gently. "But Mia, it doesn't change anything between us. You're still my daughter, and I'm still your dad." Her voice wavered. "I know, Dad. It's hard to wrap my head around." "I understand," I said. "Take all the time you need. I'm here for you, no matter what." We talked for a while longer, and by the end of the call, I could sense a shift in her. She wasn't just processing the truth. She was growing stronger, more resolute. It gave me the strength I needed to move forward. The following week, I began pulling the strings. I withdrew the remaining money from our joint accounts and moved it into a separate account Rebecca couldn't access. I canceled the credit card she used for her little luxuries and started consolidating our assets under my name. Rebecca was oblivious, still living in her bubble of deceit, but her world was about to collapse. I sent an anonymous tip to Matthew's employer, including the evidence of his tax fraud and workplace misconduct. The fallout was swift. By the end of the week, he was suspended pending an internal investigation. The news spread quickly, and his reputation began to crumble. Rebecca, meanwhile, remained unaware of the storm gathering around her. She still smiled, still scrolled through her phone, still drank her wine as though everything was fine. It was almost laughable, her arrogance. But her time was coming. I planned my confrontation carefully. It wouldn't be in private, where she could spin her lies or twist the narrative. No, I wanted her to face the full weight of her actions in a setting where she couldn't escape or deflect. The storm was about to hit, and Rebecca had no idea just how devastating it would be. Chapter 6: The Confrontation. The evening of the confrontation arrived sooner than I expected. Rebecca was seated in the living room, her feet tucked beneath her as she scrolled through her phone. A glass of wine sat on the table next to her, untouched for once. She looked relaxed, oblivious to the wreckage I had already set in motion. I walked in and stood silently for a moment, watching her. She finally glanced up, sensing my presence. "You're home early," she said, her tone light. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I replied, my voice calm but firm. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope containing the DNA test results, the photos of her and Matthew, and copies of the emails I had uncovered. I dropped it onto the coffee table in front of her. Rebecca's smile faltered. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tinged with unease. "Take a look," I said, gesturing toward the envelope. She hesitated, then picked it up. Her hand shook slightly as she opened it, pulling out the contents. Her eyes scanned the DNA test results first. I watched as the color drained from her face. She moved on to the photos, her breathing quickening. By the time she reached the emails, her composure had cracked completely. "Raina," she began, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "No," I interrupted, my tone sharp. "No more lies, Rebecca. No more excuses. I know everything. About Matthew, about Mia, about all the years you spent making me a fool." Tears welled in her eyes as she stammered. "It wasn't." "Stop." I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "You don't get to rewrite the story now. You lied to me for years. You let me sacrifice everything, my time, my money, my life, while you carried on with him behind my back." She slumped back against the couch, her tears now spilling freely. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "Didn't you?" I countered, my voice cold. "You had every chance to come clean, Rebecca. Every chance to tell the truth. But instead, you let me believe a lie. You let me raise a child, thinking she was mine, knowing she wasn't." Rebecca covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. I felt no pity, no sympathy, only a cold satisfaction that the truth was finally out in the open. "Who else knows?" I demanded, my tone cutting. "How many people have been laughing behind my back all these years? Who else knew about Matthew?" She shook her head. "No one. It wasn't like that. Don't lie to me again," I warned. "You're not in control anymore, Rebecca." "I am." She lowered her hands, her tear-streaked face a mixture of fear and desperation. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned closer, my voice steady and deliberate. What am I going to do? I'm going to make sure you feel every ounce of what you've put me through. I've already frozen our accounts. Your credit card? Canceled. The life you've built on my back. It's over. Her eyes widened in shock. You can't do this, she said, her voice rising in panic. Ryan, please. I can, I said, cutting her off. And I will. You thought you could get away with this, but you've underestimated me for the last time. Rebecca stared at me, her tears slowing as anger replaced her fear. You're not innocent in all of this, she spat. You were always so busy working, so obsessed with being the provider. You never noticed what was happening right in front of you. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. You don't get to blame me for your choices, Rebecca. You don't get to turn this around on me. This is your mess, and you're going to face the consequences. She glared at me, her expression defiant despite her tears. You're going to destroy this family, she said. This family was already destroyed, I replied. The moment you chose to lie, the moment you brought Matthew into our lives, you made that decision. Now you're going to live with it. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sitting on the couch, clutching the evidence of her betrayal. My chest was tight, my hand shaking, but my resolve was stronger than ever. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. That night, I slept on the couch. The house was eerily quiet, the tension between us palpable even in the silence. I knew Rebecca wouldn't give up easily, but I was prepared for whatever came next. The next morning, Rebecca was up early, pacing the kitchen with her phone in hand. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale. She looked like a shadow of the confident woman she had been just days ago. Ryan, she said as I walked in. Her voice was calmer now, almost pleading. We need to talk. I think we've said everything we need to say, I replied, grabbing a cup of coffee and avoiding her gaze. Please, she said, stepping closer. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. We can move past it. I set the coffee down and turned to face her, my expression hard. Fix it? There's no fixing this, Rebecca. You destroyed any chance of that the moment you chose to lie. This isn't something we can just move past. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. There was none to give. You should start packing, I said finally, because once the papers are filed, you won't be staying here. Her face crumpled, and she turned away, gripping the counter as if it were the only thing holding her up. I walked out, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. Rebecca's world was crumbling, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to save her. This was her mess to deal with. My focus was on Mia and on rebuilding my life, one without lies, without betrayal, and without Rebecca. Chapter 7. Rebuilding Trust and Tearing Down Lies. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of action. Rebecca tried every trick in the book to regain control. Apologies, anger, manipulation, but I stood firm. Her pleas fell on deaf ears as I focused on setting my plan into motion. The house, which once felt like a haven, now felt like a battleground. Rebecca's every move reeked of desperation, from the constant calls to friends to her frantic whispers on the phone. She hadn't yet realized how much I had taken from her, but the cracks in her facade were widening. It was only a matter of time. Conversations with Mia. I made a point to visit Mia the weekend after the confrontation. She had been distant since our last talk, but I understood. Rebecca's lies had left her reeling too. Still, I needed her to know that I was there for her, no matter what. When she opened the door to her dorm room, her eyes were red and tired. Hey, Dad, she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. Hey, sweetheart, I said, offering her a small smile. I held up a box of pastries from her favorite bakery. Thought you could use a little pick-me-up. Her lips twitched into a weak smile as she took the box. Thanks. We sat at her small kitchen table, the pastries between us. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the weight of the truth she was still processing. I know this hasn't been easy, I began, breaking the silence. And I want you to know that I don't blame you for any of it. None of this is your fault. She nodded, her fingers picking at the edge of a napkin. I know. It's just hard. I don't even know who I'm supposed to be mad at anymore. You don't have to figure it out right now, I said gently. Take your time. You're allowed to feel however you need to feel. Her voice wavered as she asked, Do you hate her? I sighed, considering the question. Hate is a strong word. I'm angry, yes. Betrayed. But hate? No. It's not worth the energy. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I hate her for doing this to you. And to me. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're stronger than you realize, Mia. And we're going to get through this together. You're still my daughter, no matter what. She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in days, I saw a glimmer of hope in her expression. Rebecca is growing desperation. Back at home, Rebecca was unraveling. She had started to notice the financial changes, the frozen accounts, the canceled credit card, and the realization that her comfortable life was slipping away hit her hard. One afternoon, I came home to find her pacing the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She turned to me the moment I walked in, her eyes wild. What have you done, Ryan? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. The bank says our accounts are frozen. My credit card isn't working. What's going on? I shrugged, setting my keys on the counter. I'm securing what's mine. What's yours? She repeated, her voice rising. This is our money, our life. You can't just take it all away. Actually, I can, I said calmly. And I have. You've taken enough from me, Rebecca. It's time you face the consequences. Her jaw tightened, and she pointed a finger at me. You're being cruel. What about Mia? She needs stability. Mia is stable, I shot back. She's at college, focusing on her future. You, on the other hand, have no one to blame but yourself. Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. You're going to ruin everything, she whispered. I leaned against the doorway, my arms crossed. No, Rebecca, you already ruined everything. I'm just making sure you don't get to benefit from it anymore. The Matthew bombshell. The next morning, Rebecca's world took another hit. Matthew Price's name was plastered across the local news. Senior executives suspended amid allegations of fraud and misconduct. The fallout was swift and public. Rebecca was in the kitchen when the story aired, her coffee cup trembling in her hands as she stared at the screen. I watched from the living room, my expression unreadable. You did this, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with disbelief. You tipped them off. What makes you think that? I replied, feigning innocence. She slammed the coffee cup onto the counter, the liquid sloshing over the rim. Because I know you, Ryan. You're trying to destroy everything. Correction, I said, standing to face her. I'm exposing the truth. You're the one who destroyed everything. I'm just making sure the world knows it. Rebecca's hands trembled as she clenched her fists. You're going to regret this. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. No, Rebecca. The only regret I have is not seeing through your lies sooner. The final move. With Matthew's career in shambles and Rebecca's financial resources dwindling, I made my final move. The divorce papers were ready, airtight with evidence of her infidelity, financial fraud, and emotional abuse. I sent them through my lawyer, ensuring she had no room to contest the terms. When the papers arrived, Rebecca was livid. She stormed into the living room, waving them in the air. You're seriously doing this, she shouted. You're just going to throw away everything we've built. I met her glare with a calm, steady gaze. You mean everything I built? Yes, because you built nothing but lies. She threw the papers onto the coffee table, her shoulders heaving with anger. What are you going to do, Ryan? Walk away? Take everything and leave me with nothing. That's exactly what I'm going to do, I said, my voice cold. You made your choices, Rebecca. Now you can live with them. She stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, she looked truly powerless. A new beginning. The house felt different after that. Rebecca's presence was heavy, but her control was gone. I focused on the future, on helping Mia process the truth, on rebuilding my life, and on ensuring Rebecca and Matthew faced the consequences of their actions. As I packed up my belongings, readying myself to leave the house that had become a battleground, I felt the strange mix of emotions: sadness, anger, relief. But above all, I felt free. Rebecca thought she could control the narrative, but the truth had shattered her carefully constructed world. And as I prepared to walk away, I knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning of my new life, one built on honesty, strength, and the love of the people who truly mattered. Chapter 8: Closure and Rebirth. The final days in the house passed in a blur of packing and preparation. Rebecca had retreated into silence, her protests and manipulations having failed to sway me. The weight of the truth had settled over her, and for the first time, I saw her for who she truly was: a woman who had thrived on deception, now left to confront the consequences of her actions. The departure. On the morning of my departure, the house was eerily quiet. I stood in the living room, surrounded by packed boxes, staring at the empty walls that once held family photos. The life I thought I had built was gone, replaced by the raw truth of Rebecca's betrayal. Rebecca appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale and drawn. "So, this is it?" she asked, her voice hollow. "This is it," I replied, not looking at her. She descended the stairs slowly, each step heavy with the weight of unspoken words. "I never wanted it to end like this, Ryan," she said softly. I turned to face her, my expression calm but resolute. "You made your choices, Rebecca. This ending, it's yours, not mine." She opened her mouth to speak but closed it again, her shoulders sagging. For the first time, she seemed to accept that there was nothing left to say. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Before stepping outside, I paused and turned back to her. "Take care of yourself, Rebecca. I hope one day you understand the damage you've done." With that, I walked out, closing the door on a chapter of my life that had been filled with lies, pain, and sacrifice. Rebuilding with Mia. The first few weeks on my own were difficult, but they were also liberating. I moved into a small but comfortable apartment, a space that felt like my own for the first time in years. The weight of Rebecca's betrayal still lingered, but each day brought a little more clarity, a little more peace. Mia called often, and our conversations grew longer and more meaningful. She had been angry at Rebecca, at Matthew, and even at me for not seeing the truth sooner, but over time, that anger gave way to understanding. One weekend, she visited me at my new place. She stood in the doorway, looking around the sparsely decorated living room. "It's different," she said, small smile tugging at her lips. "Different is good," I replied, motioning for her to sit. "It's a fresh start." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, her voice steady. "And I want you to know that no matter what the DNA says, you're my dad. You've always been my dad." Hearing those words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in months. "And you'll always be my daughter," I said, my voice thick with emotion. We spent the day talking, laughing, and rebuilding the bond that Rebecca's lies had threatened to destroy. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Rebecca's collapse. Meanwhile, Rebecca's world continued to crumble. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly thanks to the mountain of evidence I had gathered. She tried to fight the terms at first, but the weight of her actions and the legal consequences of her lies left her with little room to argue. Matthew Price's life was in shambles as well. The allegations against him escalated, and he soon found himself unemployed and under investigation. Rebecca tried to reach out to him, desperate for support, but he wanted nothing to do with her. The man she had risked everything for had abandoned her when she needed him most. In the end, Rebecca was left alone, her once perfect life reduced to ruins. It was a fitting end for someone who had thrived on deceit. Moving forward, as the months passed, I began to rebuild, not just my life, but my sense of self. I poured my energy into work, hobbies, and reconnecting with friends I had neglected during the years I spent consumed by Rebecca's lies. Each small step felt like a victory, a reclaiming of the life I had sacrificed for someone who didn't deserve it. Mia and I grew closer than ever. She visited often, and we started new traditions together: movie nights, weekend hikes, and long talks over breakfast. Our relationship wasn't defined by biology. It was built on love, trust, and shared experiences. One evening, as we sat by the lake near my apartment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Mia turned to me and said, "You know, Dad, I think we're going to be okay." I smiled, the weight of the past finally beginning to lift. "Yeah," I said, squeezing her hand. "We are. A new beginning." The final piece of my healing came on a quiet afternoon when I stood at the edge of a wooded park near my apartment. In my hands was the envelope containing the DNA test results and the photos of Rebecca and Matthew. These pieces of paper had once felt like the weight of the world, but now they were nothing more than remnants of a life I had left behind. I lit a small fire in a designated pit, watching as the flames danced in the breeze. One by one, I fed the documents into the fire, watching them curl and blacken before turning to ash. With each piece that burned, I felt lighter, freer. By the time the fire had consumed everything, I stood there with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to create. As I walked away from the park, the sun breaking through the clouds above, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Life had given me a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. To the men and women out there who have faced betrayal and heartbreak, I'll leave you with this. You are stronger than you know. The lies and deceit of others do not define you. Stand up, rebuild, and write your own story. Because in the end, the truth is not just a revelation, it's a rebirth. The next chapter was mine to write, and for the first time in years, I felt ready to embrace it.